A poor girl pointed to the poster of a millionaire's missing wife and said, "She lives in my house." Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever, a story of mystery and love that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The December sun relentlessly scorched the paved streets of the East Side neighborhood, creating heat waves that distorted the landscape of the eastern outskirts of Los Angeles. Rachel hurried down Metalworkers Avenue, tightly holding the sweaty hand of her 8-year-old daughter, Isabella, who dragged her feet on the hot ground. They were returning from the supermarket with a half-empty bag. The week's money had only stretched to the essentials: rice, beans, oil, and a box of pasta. "Mom, I'm thirsty," Isabella complained, tugging at her faded pink dress that clung to her thin body from sweat. "We're almost home, sweetheart. There's cold water in the fridge," Rachel replied, adjusting her bag on her shoulder and trying to maintain her brisk pace. At 42, she bore the marks of someone who intimately knew the daily struggle for survival. Her calloused hands told the story of years spent scrubbing floors, ironing clothes, and cleaning the homes of the affluent in Los Angeles. It was then that Isabella suddenly stopped in front of a lamppost, nearly knocking her mother over. Her brown eyes widened like saucers, fixed on something stuck to the peeling concrete. "Mom! Mom, look!" the girl shouted, pointing with her little finger at a yellowed poster. "It's Aunt Anna!" Rachel felt her blood run cold. There, printed on glossy paper contrasting with the lampost's precariousness, was the face of Anna, the mysterious woman who had taken them in 3 months ago. The photo showed a more polished version of her. Impeccable blonde hair, professional makeup, discreet but expensive jewelry. Above the image, in bold red letters, "Missing." Below, information that made Rachel's heart race. Helen Smith, 38 years old, wife of businessman Robert Smith, disappeared on September 15th. Reward $100,000. "Aunt Anna's name is Helen?" Isabella asked, tilting her confused little head. "And why are they looking for her?" "She's at home making brownies for us." Rachel grabbed her daughter by the arm, more abruptly than she intended. "Let's go, Isa, now." "But, Mom, that man over there is looking at the poster too," the girl insisted, pointing to a man in a suit who was photographing the paper with his cell phone. The stranger was tall, thin, around 50 years old, and wore expensive sunglasses that contrasted with the surroundings. When he realized he was being watched, he quickly put away his phone and walked toward a black Civic parked at the corner. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. She picked up Isabella, ignoring the girl's protests that she was too big for this, and practically ran the 3 blocks that separated the lamppost from their home. The 2-room apartment on the ground floor of a public housing building had never seemed so far away. The key trembled in her hands when she finally reached the blue peeling door with the number 103 painted by hand. The familiar smell of coffee and dish soap welcomed her, along with the melodious voice humming a tune from the kitchen radio. "Anna!" Rachel called, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Anna, I need to talk to you." The woman appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a floral dish towel. Helen Smith, now Rachel knew her real name, at 38 still maintained a natural beauty even while wearing Rachel's old t-shirt and faded shorts. Her blonde hair, now darker at the roots and lacking the care of an expensive salon, was tied up in a simple bun. But it was her green eyes that drew the most attention, expressive and intelligent, though often clouded by a haze of confusion and fear. "Hi, Rachel. Hi, sweetheart." She smiled at Isabella, who ran to hug her. "How was shopping? I managed to finish organizing the kitchen cabinet and—" "Anna," Rachel interrupted, forcefully placing the bag on the floor. "Your name is Helen." Anna's smile slowly faded. She released Isabella and leaned against the doorframe as if her legs would give way. I don't understand," she murmured, bringing her hand to her forehead. "Why are you saying this?" Because I saw a poster with your photo. You're not Anna, you're Helen Smith, wife of a businessman named Robert Smith, and there's a reward of $100,000 for information about you." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella looked confused from one woman to the other, sensing the tension in the air without fully understanding what was happening. Anna, Helen, slid down the wall until she sat on the cold floor of the hallway. Her hands trembled violently as she tried to process the information. "Robert," she whispered, and for the first time in 3 months, a spark of recognition shone in her eyes. "Robert Smith. I know that name." Rachel knelt beside her, taking her cold hands. "Anna, Helen, whatever you want to be called, you need to tell me the truth. Why did you show up injured in our neighborhood? Why can't you remember anything?" Tears began to stream down Helen's face. Fragments of painful memories started to form in her mind like shards of glass cutting through the fog of forgetfulness. "I was running," she murmured, squeezing her eyes shut. "It was raining hard. There was blood on my head, and fear, so much fear." "Fear of what? Of whom?" "I don't know, or rather, I don't want to know." Helen opened her eyes, now shining with a frightening determination. "Rachel, whoever I was before, I don't want to go back. That life, I feel like it was a prison." Isabella timidly approached and took Helen's hand. "Aunt Anna, are you going to leave? You can't go away. We're family now." Helen. She looked at the girl, then at Rachel, and a decision formed on her face. "No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. You are my family." But Rachel knew that the tranquility of the last 3 months had come to an end. Outside, men in suits were photographing posters, and somewhere in the city, a businessman named Robert Smith was searching for his missing wife. The storm that was coming would be much greater than the September rains that had brought Helen to them. Dawn arrived without any of the 3 women managing to sleep properly. Rachel stayed awake. In the living room, sitting on the worn-out sofa, watching through the small window for any suspicious movement on the street. Helen had locked herself in the bathroom for over an hour, trying to force the memories that insisted on coming back in pieces, like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Isabella, even without fully understanding the gravity of the situation, felt the tension in the air and tossed and turned in the bed she shared with her mother. When the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the cheap curtains, Helen finally emerged from the bathroom with red, swollen eyes. She found Rachel still in the living room, holding a cup of cold coffee in her hands. "Did you manage to sleep?" Rachel asked, not taking her eyes off the window. "No." Helen sat down beside her, pulling her legs to her chest. "But I managed to remember some things. Fragments, actually." Rachel finally looked at her. "Tell me." Helen took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep, murky waters. "I remember a big house. Very big. With huge gardens and a pool that looked like a lake. I remember maids. Many maids. And a man, Robert. Yes, Robert. Grey hair, always in a suit. He yelled a lot. Not at me, never directly at me, but on the phone. Always on the phone, talking about business, money, people who didn't understand how things worked." Rachel felt a knot in her stomach. She knew men like that well, the bosses who never saw her as a person, just as a disposable tool. "And you? What was your life like there?" Helen closed her eyes, forcing the memories. "I had everything. Expensive clothes, jewelry, cars, but—" She paused, her voice choked. "But I felt empty, like I was just a doll in a showcase, beautiful, well-dressed, but without a life of my own." "Did you work?" "I don't know. I don't think so. I remember social lunches, openings, charity events, always by his side, always smiling, always silent." Tears began to flow again. Rachel, I don't want to be that person again. Here, with you, for the first time in I don't know how long. I feel real. Isabella's crying from the bedroom interrupted the conversation. The two women quickly got up, but it was just a nightmare. The girl soon calmed down in her mother's arms and went back to sleep. She can't get involved in this, Rachel whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. If this Robert is who I think he is, if he has enough money to offer $100,000 in reward, he has power, and powerful men can be dangerous when they don't get what they want. So what do we do? Rachel looked out the window again. The movement in the street started early in the outskirts, workers heading for the first bus, children running to school, street vendors setting up their stalls, normal everyday life which now seemed threatened. First, you will continue to be Anna, at least here in the neighborhood. Second, we will find out more about this Robert Smith. And third, she hesitated. Third what? Maybe it's time for you to remember why you were running that night. Later that morning, while Isabella was at school, Rachel left Helen at home and went to the internet cafe run by Mrs. Constance, 2 streets down. The owner, a 65-year-old lady who knew all the neighborhood secrets, was organizing the bills when Rachel entered. Hi, dear, what brings you here so early? Need the computer? I do, Mrs. Constance, and I also need your discretion. The woman raised an eyebrow. Now I'm intrigued. Sit down, and I'll make some coffee. Minutes later, with a steaming cup in her hands, Rachel explained the situation to Mrs. Constance, who listened in silence, occasionally shaking her head in disapproval. Girl, you really stepped into it, she finally said. Robert Smith? I know that name. My son-in-law works in construction, and that man owns one of the largest construction companies in Los Angeles. They say he has connections with politicians, judges, people who can make someone disappear without a trace. That's why I need to know more about him. Rachel turned on the computer. If Helen is running from him, there's a reason. The Google search revealed an impressive business empire. Robert Smith, 52, CEO of Smith & Associates Developments, specializing in urban revitalization, a fancy euphemism for gentrification. His company had been responsible for transforming several central neighborhoods in Los Angeles, displacing poor families and building residential complexes for the elite. Look at this, Rachel murmured, clicking on a news article from 6 months ago. Investigation by the district attorney's office into irregularities in property seizures. Families claim they were forced to sell their homes for below-market prices. Mrs. Constance leaned in to see the screen. And look at his picture here. He has the face of someone who doesn't know the word no. The photo showed Robert Smith at a press conference, denying any wrongdoing. Impeccable suit, haughty posture, eyes as cold as ice. Beside him, a blonde and elegant woman, Helen. Our girl was right next to him when this investigation came to light, noted Mrs. Constance. I wonder if she knew something. Rachel continued her search. She found social media pages showing the couple at charity events, openings, political dinners. In every photo, Helen smiled politely, but Rachel noticed something that probably no one else would. Her eyes never smiled along with her mouth. Mrs. Constance, can you do me a favor? Depends on the favor, sweetheart. Can you keep an eye on the street today? If someone different or strange shows up, text me. Mrs. Johnson took Rachel's phone and saved her number. You got it. But Rachel, are you sure about what you're doing? Protecting that woman is one thing, but confronting a man like that... I'm not going to confront him. Rachel shut down her computer. I just want to protect my daughter and a woman who considers us family. That's not a crime. No, it's not a crime, but sometimes doing what's right can be very dangerous. Rachel knew Mrs. Johnson was right, but as she walked back home, she thought about Helen, the woman she had come to know over the last 3 months, the woman who woke up early to help Isabella with her homework, who shared the last cookie from the pack, who cried with emotion while watching soap operas. This Helen was real. She was family, and family protects each other even when the whole world is against you. Arriving home, she found Helen in the kitchen preparing lunch with the simple ingredients they had. She was humming softly, her hair tied back with a regular elastic, her bare feet on the cold floor. Nothing like the glamorous woman in the newspapers. "Did you find out anything?" Helen asked without turning around. "I did, and I didn't like what I saw." Helen stopped stirring the beans and turned slowly. "That bad?" "Worse than we imagined." The afternoon fell heavily over the East Side neighborhood, laden with grey clouds threatening rain. Helen was sitting on the small balcony of the apartment, watching the children play in the inner courtyard of the housing complex, when the memory hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Helen, you don't understand anything about business. Leave that to the men." Robert's voice echoed in her mind so clearly that she put her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. It was a specific recent memory. They were in his office at home, surrounded by papers and architectural plans. She had asked a question, something about the families that would be removed from a lot, and he had silenced her with that condescending tone she knew so well. "Anna, are you okay?" Isabella appeared on the balcony, coming back from school with her backpack and her uniform dirty from the ground. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How was school?" "Aunt Marcia asked if you were really our relative. I told her you were our family from the heart." Helen felt a tightness in her chest. "And what else did Aunt Marcia say?" "Nothing much, just that a man showed up at school today, asking about new women living in the neighborhood. She told him to look for the principal." Helen's blood ran cold. "What kind of man, Isa?" "In a suit. Kind of old. He had a black car parked at the school." Helen quickly stood up, took Isabella by the hand, and went into the apartment. Rachel was coming home from work, still wearing the blue uniform from the cleaning company, her hair pulled back in a tight bun that showed her tired face. "Ray, I need to talk to you. Now." Rachel immediately sensed the urgency in Helen's tone. "Isa, go take a shower and start your homework. I'll be back to help you." When the girl disappeared into the bathroom, Helen told Rachel about the memory that had returned and about the man at school. "He's getting closer," Rachel murmured, taking off her uniform and putting on an old t-shirt. "I don't know how, but he found out you're here. Ray, I remembered one more thing today. In Robert's office, there were documents, plans for a project in the East Side, close by, actually. He was planning to demolish a housing complex to build a shopping center." "Which complex?" "I don't remember the name, but—" Helen paused, forcing her memory. "I remember seeing pictures, low buildings painted in different colors, green, blue, yellow." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. "Helen, you're describing it. Our complex. The Hope residence." The two women looked at each other in silence, the weight of the revelation falling on them like a stone. "That's why you showed up here," Rachel whispered. "It wasn't a coincidence. You knew this place." "But I don't understand. Why would I be running? If I was his wife, why wouldn't I agree with the business?" Rachel sat down on the plastic chair in the kitchen, running her hands through her hair. "Helen, you need to try to remember what happened that night. What made you run?" Helen closed her eyes, trying to dive into the murky waters of her fragmented memory. Images began to form, still confusing but clearer. She was in Robert's office late at night. He had left for a meeting and forgotten some documents open on the table. Curious, she approached to look. Architectural plans, aerial photos, and something that made her freeze, a list with names and addresses, families that were to be relocated, next to some names, Chilling notes, resistant, legal action necessary, elderly, psychological pressure, single mother, offer a pittance. I saw the list. Helen opened her eyes suddenly. A list with family names. They weren't just going to expropriate. They were going to manipulate, pressure, use dirty methods to force people to sell. What kind of methods? Water cut-offs, electrical issues, veiled threats. All to make families give up and accept any amount. Helen stood up, nervously pacing the small room. And I took pictures of the documents. Rachel's eyes widened. You have evidence? I did. I saved everything on a flash drive that I hid in my room, but Robert found out. The memory kept coming back, clearer now. Helen remembered Robert coming home that night, earlier than expected. He found her still in the office, trying to put the papers back in order. What are you doing here, Helen? I was just going through my things. Again. The argument escalated quickly. Robert discovered the photos, about the flash drive. Her fury was beyond anything Helen had ever witnessed. You don't understand the importance of what I do, how many jobs I create, how much money I circulate in this city. At the expense of poor families, Robert. These people have nowhere to go. And since when is that our problem? It was then that Helen truly understood who she had been married to for 15 years. Not just an ambitious businessman, but a man capable of destroying lives without remorse. So what? Rachel asked, holding her breath. I said I would report everything, that I would go to the authorities, the press, anyone who would listen. Helen sat back down, her legs trembling. That's when he hit me. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Isabella humming in the shower. Wasn't it the first time? Rachel asked softly. No, but it was the first time I fought back. I pushed him, grabbed the car keys and ran. It was pouring rain. I was driving desperately without direction. I just wanted to escape. And the accident? It wasn't an accident. I was being chased. A black truck trying to run me off the road. I lost control on the curve of Ragweb Chofi Avenue. I hit my head on the steering wheel, got out of the car, injured, and ran. I ran until I couldn't anymore. That's when everything clicked in Rachel's mind. Helen had shown up in the early hours of September 16th, 3 blocks away, with a wound on her forehead and her clothes soaked. She and Isabella were coming back from Rachel's sister's house when they found her passed out under an awning. The flash drive, Rachel said. Where did you hide it? At the base of a plant pot in my room, a fern that I took care of myself. Helen, if that evidence is still there, it could take down Robert. It could save not only our building, but all the other families that are in his sights. Rachel looked out the window, where the rain was finally starting to fall. But first, we need to survive long enough to use that evidence. From the bathroom, Isabella shouted, "Mom, the water's coming out cold." The 2 women exchanged glances. In the suburbs, it was common for the water to heat up slowly. But after what Helen had just revealed, no coincidence seemed innocent anymore. The war had begun, and they didn't even know how many enemies they were facing. The rain turned into a storm during the night, and with it came the first signs that the peaceful life of the past weeks was coming to an end. Rachel woke up to the sound of cars slowly passing by the street, something unusual in Hope Residence, where nighttime traffic was practically non-existent. She got up quietly, trying not to wake Isabella, and went to the living room window. Through the curtains, she could make out a dark sedan parked across the street, with 2 men in the front seat. One of them was talking on the phone while the other watched the buildings intently. "Helen," she whispered, touching the shoulder of the woman sleeping on the couch. "Wake up. We have company." Helen woke up instantly, as if her body were conditioned to react to danger. She joined Rachel at the window and felt her stomach churn at the sight of the men. "I know the one on the phone," she murmured, her voice trembling. It's Cardoso, Robert's right-hand man, a former military police officer turned private security. What does he do? Whatever Robert tells him, intimidation, blackmail, things a respectable businessman can't do personally. Rachel closed the curtains and stepped away from the window. We need to get out of here. And go where? With a child? My sister Carla lives in the Arts District, small apartment, but she can take us in for a few days. Helen shook her head. Ray, you don't understand. Robert has unlimited resources, private investigators, contacts in the police, lawyers specialized in making people disappear legally. Wherever we go, he will find us. So what do you suggest? That I hand you over to him? No. I suggest we recover that flash drive. Rachel looked at her as if she had lost her mind. You want to go back to his house? It's the only way. If we can get the evidence, we can negotiate, or better yet, we can take him down. The plan was insane, but Helen was right about one thing. Fleeing without a trump card would only delay the inevitable. And with Robert Smith using his resources to find them, eventually there would be nowhere left to run. Mum? Isabella's sleepy voice came from the bedroom. Why are you two whispering? We'll be right there, sweetheart, Rachel replied. We're just planning what to do today. Helen leaned closer to Rachel, speaking so softly it was almost inaudible. I need to go alone. You stay with Isabella, go to your sisters. No way. I'm not letting you face this alone. Ray, you have a daughter. I can't put her in danger because of my problems. Your problems? Rachel raised her voice slightly, then controlled herself. Helen, you saved hundreds of families by taking those photos, including ours. This isn't just your problem. The discussion was interrupted by Rachel's phone ringing. It was Mrs. Johnson. Honey, you need to know something. There are men asking about you here at the internet cafe. They wanted to know your work schedule, where Isabella goes to school. I told them I didn't know anything, but they're offering money for information. Rachel felt her blood run cold. How much money? $500 for anyone who knows where you live. $1,000 for anyone who knows about new women who arrived in the neighborhood in the last few months. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Johnson. And be careful. You too, dear. Those men, they look like they mean business. Rachel hung up and turned to Helen, who had overheard the entire conversation. They know where we are. It's only a matter of time before someone takes the money. That's why we need to act fast. Helen was already putting on the borrowed t-shirt and jeans. You take Isabella to your sisters. I'll go after the flash drive. And how do you plan to get into the house? Helen smiled sadly. I'm still his wife. Technically, I still live there. 2 hours later, while Rachel was packing a small backpack with clothes for Isabella, Helen watched the activity on the street through a crack in the curtain. The men in the car had taken turns, but the surveillance continued. Aunt Anna, are we going on a trip? Isabella asked, excited about the prospect of breaking the routine. You're going to stay with Aunt Carla for a few days, Rachel explained, trying to keep her voice calm. Remember Aunt Carla? She has that chubby cat, Garfield. Is Aunt Anna coming too? Helen knelt in front of the little girl, holding her tiny hands. Isa, I need to take care of a few things first, but I promise we'll be together again soon. Do you really promise? Helen looked into the child's trusting eyes and felt her heart break. I promise. It was a promise she might not be able to keep, but at that moment it was all she could offer. The plan was simple, but risky. Rachel would exit through the emergency exit of the building which led to the back parking lot and take an Uber to her sister's house with Isabella. Half an hour later, Helen would leave through the front door, allow herself to be seen by the watchers, and lead them away from the neighborhood. What if it goes wrong? Rachel asked, adjusting the backpack on her daughter's back. If it goes wrong, at least you'll be Safe. Helen. Ray, you gave me 3 months of your life, 3 months of family, of true love. For the first time in 15 years, I knew what it was like to be truly happy. Now it's my turn to protect that happiness. The two women embraced, knowing it might be the last time. If you get the flash drive, call me from Mrs. Johnson's phone. Carla's number is in my phone's contacts. I will get it. Helen tried to sound more confident than she felt. Rachel took Isabella by the hand and headed for the back door. Come on, sweetheart, let's go see Garfield. Goodbye, Aunt Anna, Isabella waved. Don't take too long, okay? I won't take long, Helen lied, waving back. When the door closed, Helen was left alone in the small apartment that had become her home. She looked around, memorizing every detail. The old sofa where she slept, the plastic table where they had meals together, the fridge covered in Isabella's drawings. 20 minutes later, she opened the front door and calmly walked toward the bus stop. She didn't look back, but she knew she was being followed. The real battle was just beginning, and this time she would fight with her own weapons. The bus ride from Eastside neighborhood to the gardens took almost 2 hours, enough time for Helen to organize her thoughts and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. With every mile that took her away from the outskirts and toward the heart of the elite in Los Angeles, she felt torn between two versions of herself. The simple, genuine woman she had discovered in the last 3 months, and Robert Smith's wife that she needed to portray to get what she wanted. The dark sedan followed discreetly, always keeping 2 or 3 cars back. Helen knew that Cardoso was just following orders, tracking her until he discovered where she was hiding, not necessarily to arrest her. Robert wanted his wife back, but he wanted even more to know what she had discovered and with whom she had shared that information. She got off the bus on Main Street and walked calmly toward Augusta Street, entering the first mall she found. In the bathrooms on the 3rd floor, she locked herself in a stall and called the only person she could still trust. Sandra, it's me, Helen. Oh my God, Helen, where are you? Robert is going crazy looking for you. The whole city knows you've disappeared. Sandra Johnson had been her best friend in college and had remained close even after the marriage, one of the few people who dared to question Robert's controlling behavior. Sandy, I need your help, and I need you not to tell anyone that I spoke to you. Helen, what happened? Robert said you had a nervous breakdown. That's a lie. I discovered things about his business, things that could put hundreds of families on the street. I need to go home and get some evidence. Are you crazy? He has 24-hour security at the house, and there's a private investigator who... I know, that's why I need your help. Do you remember the code for the garage gate? I remember, but Helen, I just need 15 minutes inside the house. Can you give me a ride and wait on the corner? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Okay, but Helen, promise me that after this, you'll explain everything properly. I promise. They arranged to meet in an hour in the mall parking lot. Helen left the bathroom and headed to a clothing store, where she bought with the little money she had a dress shirt and a nicer pair of pants. She needed at least to try to look like the Helen Smith that the household staff knew. The Smith mansion was located on a quiet street in the gardens, hidden behind tall walls and immaculate gardens. Sandra parked the car 2 blocks away, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Helen, I'm really scared. What if they find out I helped you? They won't find out. You'll stay here with your phone in hand. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, you leave and forget you saw me. And what if you get caught? Helen touched her friend's shoulder. Sandy, for 15 years I've lived in that house like a doll, beautifully dressed, but without a voice of my own. In the last 3 months, for the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to have a real family. People who love me for who I am, not for what I represent. It's worth risking for that. Sandra nodded, still scared but understanding. Helen's determination was clear. Go, but be careful. She walked calmly through the familiar streets, passing houses where she had attended dinners and social events. Everything seemed smaller than she remembered, as if the 3 months of absence had changed her perspective on that world of privilege. The garage gate was closed, but the code still worked. Helen entered quietly, observing Robert's 3 cars parked. The black Mercedes, the white BMW, and the Range Rover he used on weekends. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The door leading into the house was unlocked. After all, who would dare invade Robert Smith's property? Helen climbed the marble stairs toward the master bedroom, each step echoing softly in the afternoon silence. The couple's bedroom was just as she remembered, immense, decorated with expensive but impersonal furniture. The fern was still in the same spot, in the corner near the window. Helen knelt down and carefully dug through the potting soil until she found the small plastic bag where she had hidden the USB drive. Still so predictable, Helen. She turned slowly to find Robert Smith standing in the doorway, wearing a perfectly tailored grey suit, his grey hair impeccably styled. At 52, he maintained the authoritative posture of someone used to having all his desires met immediately. Robert, 3 months. 3 months I searched for you. I hired the best investigators, offered rewards, mobilized all my contacts. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. And where were you? In some low-income neighborhood playing poor. Helen stood up, hiding the USB drive in the palm of her hand. I was discovering who I really am. You are my wife. You are Helen Smith. Your identity is tied to mine. Your life makes sense through mine. No, I am so much more than that. Robert walked toward her, and Helen could see the calculating coldness in his blue eyes. Where are the copies of the documents? What documents? Don't treat me like an idiot, Helen. I know you photographed the files for the Hope Project. I know you tried to blackmail me before you ran away. I didn't try to blackmail you. I tried to make you see that what you were doing was wrong. Robert laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Wrong? I create thousands of jobs. I move billions in this city's economy. I transform degraded areas into modern complexes. How can that be wrong? At the expense of families who have lived in those places for decades, at the expense of entire communities that you destroy without a second thought. Needs of progress, Helen. There have always been people who need to be removed for development to happen. Helen looked at the man she had been married to for 15 years and wondered how she had never noticed his complete lack of empathy. People are not chess pieces that you move at your convenience, Robert. They're not? Then explain to me how I managed to move you back here. The cruel smile on his lips made Helen realize she had fallen into a trap. What do you mean? Your new family is very worried about you right now, especially the little girl, Isabella, right? 8 years old, studies at Lincoln Elementary School. Helen's blood ran cold. You wouldn't dare. I don't need to dare anything, dear. I just need you to understand that some choices have consequences, and some consequences affect innocent people. Helen felt her legs tremble. Robert was not just threatening her. He was threatening Isabella. What do you want? The USB drive, all the copies you made, and your word that you will never interfere in my business again. And in return, your new family continues living their peaceful life in the suburbs. The little girl continues going to school. And you, he stepped closer, you come back home, to your place. Helen looked around the luxurious room that had been her prison for so many years. Then she thought of the small, cozy apartment where she had discovered what true love was. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow noon. And Helen... He turned as she was already leaving the room. Don't disappoint me again. This time the consequences won't just be for you. Helen descended the stairs with shaky legs, knowing she had underestimated the cruelty of the man she once promised to love and protect. The war had become personal, and now she was not just fighting for justice. She was fighting for the life of an innocent child who called her Aunt Anna. Helen left the mansion with the USB drive burning in her hand as if it were a hot iron. Each step toward the gate was accompanied by the echo of Robert's threats, reverberating in her mind like a scratched record. Sandra was in the car, nervously biting her nails, when Helen got into the passenger seat. "So, did you get what you wanted?" Sandra asked, starting the engine immediately. "I did. But things got more complicated than I imagined." During the drive back to downtown, Helen told her friend about Robert's veiled threat against Isabella. Sandra listened in silence, her face growing paler. "Oh my God, Helen. I always knew Robert was controlling, but this is psychopathic. He's always been like this, Sandy. I was just blind. Or maybe I preferred not to see. What are you going to do?" Helen looked out the car window, observing the contrast between the modern buildings downtown and the low-income neighborhood squeezed between them. Los Angeles was like that, a city that couldn't hide its inequalities, even when it tried. "I need to talk to someone who understands laws, rights, because if I hand over that USB drive to Robert, hundreds of families are going to lose their homes. And if you don't hand it over, an innocent child could pay the price." Sandra stopped the car at a red light and looked directly at Helen. "Helena, you know you can't trust his word, right? Even if he gives everything, nothing guarantees he won't harm the girl just to ensure his permanent silence." Helena knew her friend was right, but the thought of putting Isabella at risk terrified her more than any personal threat. "Just drop me off at the bus station. I need to get back there." "Helena, that's crazy. What if it's a trap?" "It's already a trap, Sandy. The question is how I'm going to get out of it." The bus back to the East Side neighborhood was packed with workers returning home after another exhausting day. Helena squeezed between two construction workers and a lady with shopping bags, trying to organize her thoughts as the city passed by the window. The flash drive was hidden in her bra, the only place she was sure no one would look. Inside were not only the evidence against Robert, but also the chance for dozens of families to keep their homes. It was a heavy responsibility for one person to carry. She got off the bus 3 stops before her destination and walked through the now familiar streets of the neighborhood. Every corner, every business had become part of her new life. The bakery run by Mr. Johnson, where she bought fresh bread in the morning. The pharmacy owned by Mrs. Smith, who always asked about Isabella. Tony's bar, where she sometimes stopped for a soda after helping Rachel with groceries. This was the community Robert wanted to destroy. These were the people he considered disposable in the name of progress. Mrs. Johnson's house had its lights on when Helena knocked on the door. The lady opened cautiously, looking out at the street before letting her in. "Girl, you scared me. Rachel is worried sick. She called here 3 times looking for news about you." "I need to talk to her, Mrs. Johnson. It's urgent. She's at her sister's house in the Arts District, but she said if you showed up, to call from any payphone." Mrs. Johnson wrote down Rachel's sister's number on a crumpled piece of paper. "And girl, there's one more thing. More men showed up here today. They offered $2,000 for anyone who knew where you were. Did anyone accept?" "Not so far, but the money is making a lot of people's heads spin, especially the younger ones. I don't know how long this protection will last." Helena took the paper with the number and headed to the payphone on the corner. Rachel answered on the first ring. "Helena, thank God. Are you okay?" "I am. And you guys?" We're at Carla's house. Issa is playing with the cat, but she asks about you every 5 minutes. Did you get what you went for? I did, but Ray, the situation is worse than we thought. I need to see you guys. No, it's dangerous for you to come here. Carla said there are strange cars circling her building too. Helena felt a tightness in her chest. Did he manage to track you? Looks like it. Helena, what happened at his place? Helena quickly recounted the meeting with Robert and the threats against Isabella. On the other end of the line, Rachel was silent for a long moment. Son of a bitch, she finally murmured. Sorry for the language, but that man has no limits. Ray, I need to make a decision by tomorrow noon, and any choice I make will affect a lot of people. What kind of choice? Either I hand over the evidence to him and hundreds of families lose their homes, or I use the evidence against him and put Isabella in danger. Rachel took a deep breath. Helena, can I ask you a question? Sure. Do you trust our justice system? The question caught Helena off guard. What do you mean? That flash drive you have. If you hand it over to the police, to the district attorney, do you believe it will be enough to put Robert behind bars? Helena thought about Robert's political connections, his expensive lawyers, his influence in the Los Angeles society. Honestly, I don't know. He has a lot of power, many contacts. Then maybe we need to play with the same weapons he does. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to stop running and start attacking. When Helena returned home, she found the apartment exactly as she had left it that morning, but something was different. A feeling in the air, a strange smell, furniture subtly out of place. Someone had been there. On the kitchen table, she found a white envelope with her name handwritten on it. Inside was a photo of Isabella leaving school, clearly taken that same day. On the back, a message in elegant cursive, "Some choices can't wait until tomorrow. R.S." Helena sat heavily in the plastic chair, staring at Isabella's smiling face in the photo. The girl who had welcomed her like family, who slept curled up with her on stormy days, who drew a picture of the three of them and stuck it on the fridge with a heart-shaped magnet. She took the flash drive and connected it to the old laptop Rachel had bought used the previous year. The screen filled with documents, fraudulent contracts, architectural plans for illegal expropriations, spreadsheets with ridiculous amounts offered to families, compromising emails between Robert and corrupt city council members. It was enough evidence to take down not only Robert, but an entire network of corruption involving politicians and construction businessmen. Hundreds of families could keep their homes. Thousands more could be spared from similar schemes in the future. But the price could be the life of an 8-year-old child. Helena looked again at the photo of Isabella and made her decision. She wouldn't hand over the flash drive to Robert, but she also wouldn't use it against him. At least, not in the conventional way. If Robert wanted to play dirty, she could too. And she knew someone who could help her level the playing field. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. Helena dialed a number she hadn't used in over 2 years. Investigative journalism. Fernanda Johnson speaking. Fern, it's me, Helena. I really need your help. Fernanda was answering from a busy newsroom in downtown Los Angeles, where journalists worked late investigating cases of corruption in the municipal administration. A former college classmate of Helena, she had specialized in exposing real estate speculation and was well acquainted with the modus operandi of businessmen like Robert Smith. Helena, my God, where have you been? Your photo is plastered all over the city. It's a long story, Fur. I need to meet you in person, and I need it to be now. Now? It's almost 10 at night. Please. It's about Robert Smith and something that could be of great interest to your newspaper. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Fernanda knew Helena well enough to understand that she would never call unless it was something truly serious. There's a 24-hour diner on Main Street near the subway. Joe's Diner. I can be there in half an hour. Thanks, Fer. And come alone. Helena arrived. At the diner, 15 minutes before Fernanda, just enough time to observe the surroundings and ensure she wasn't being followed. The place was nearly empty, with only a few night workers sipping coffee and a group of young people eating sandwiches after a night out. Fernanda arrived promptly, still wearing her work clothes, jeans, a blouse and a black leather jacket she had worn since college. At 39, she maintained the same determined and slightly rebellious air that made her question everything and everyone. "Helena, you look terrible," Fernanda said, sitting at the back table Helena had chosen. "What happened?" Helena recounted the entire story, from the accident that erased her memory to the encounter with Robert that afternoon. Fernanda listened in silence, occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook she always carried. "And do you have the evidence?" she asked, when Helena finished. "I do, but he's using an innocent child as a bargaining chip." Fernanda fell silent for a moment, processing the information. "Helena, you know I have to ask this. Why did you decide to come to me instead of going directly to the police?" "Because I know my husband. He has deputies in his pocket, judges who owe him favors, prosecutors who frequent the same clubs he does. If I hand over this evidence through official channels, it will simply disappear." "And you think the press can make a difference?" "I think the press can make it impossible for him to hide or destroy the evidence. If the story leaks publicly, with all the details, he won't be able to cover it up." Fernanda leaned forward. "Helena, I need to be clear with you. Publishing a story like this will put you at even greater risk. Robert won't just sit back and watch his empire crumble. I know. But I also know that if I do nothing, hundreds of families will lose their homes. And even if I hand everything over to him now, there's no guarantee that the threat against Isabella will stop." "About the girl, are you sure he's capable of harming a child?" Helena thought of the coldness in Robert's eyes when he mentioned Isabella. "Fer, my husband is a man who sees people as obstacles or tools. An 8-year-old girl, the daughter of a cleaner from the outskirts, means nothing to him. If it's necessary to protect his business, I understand. So we need a strategy that protects the girl while exposing the truth. Do you have any ideas?" Fernanda smiled for the first time since she arrived. "Actually, I do. But it will require courage on your part, and it will require you to trust me completely." Fernanda's plan was risky, but ingenious. Instead of simply publishing the story and hoping for the best, she proposed a coordinated operation involving the district attorney's office, the federal police, and the press working simultaneously. "I'm going to contact prosecutor Daniel Rodriguez. He's clean, has no connections to your husband, and is investigating other cases of real estate corruption. If we hand over the evidence to him at the same time we publish the story, Robert won't have time to react." "And what about Isabella?" "For that, we'll need the help of her family. Your friend Rachel seems to be a smart woman. We'll get them out of Los Angeles for a few days until the dust settles." Helena shook her head. "Rachel won't want to run away. She's stubborn, proud. She'll think she's abandoning the neighborhood and the people who depend on her work. Then we'll give her a better reason to leave the city." "What do you mean?" Fernanda put the notebook in her bag and stood up. "Come with me. There's someone you need to meet." 20 minutes later, they were in a small but tidy apartment in the Arts District, talking to Maria Johnson, a social worker who worked with families affected by forced relocation. "I'm well aware of the Hope residence case," Maria said, a black woman in her 50s with greying hair and kind yet determined eyes. Robert Smith has tried to buy that land 3 times in the last 5 years, always using questionable methods. What kind of methods? Helena asked. Cuts to essential services, sudden increases in property tax, eviction notices based on fabricated irregularities. The City Hall has always denied involvement, but there are too many coincidences. Fernanda leaned forward. Maria, if we can get documented evidence of these schemes, could you use it to help the families? Of course, but it's not just that. If the evidence is solid enough, I can file a class action lawsuit that will protect not only the Hope residents, but all the other similar projects Robert is involved in. Helena felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since leaving Robert's house. How many families are we talking about? Over 2,000, spread across the east side. The weight of responsibility fell back onto Helena's shoulders, but this time accompanied by a sense of purpose. She was not just fighting for Rachel and Isabella, but for thousands of people she didn't even know. Maria, said Fernanda, we need to protect an 8-year-old girl for a few days. Do you know of any safe place? I do. My sister has a guest house in Santa Monica. It's a small, discreet place, frequented by simple families. No one would look there. Helen looked at the 2 women she had just met, who were already willing to risk their own safety to help her. It was very different from Robert's world, where loyalty was bought with money or fear. How are we going to convince Rachel to accept the help? Maria smiled. Leave that to me. I'll talk to her like a mother talks to another mother. I'll explain that it's not about running away, it's about protecting her daughter so she can fight another day. Fernanda looked at the clock. Helen, how much time do we have before the deadline Robert gave you? 14 hours. Then we better get started now. Maria will contact Rachel. I'll call the district attorney and prepare the article. And you? And me? You will go home and pretend to consider his proposal. You need to buy time for everything to fall into place. Helen felt her stomach churn. I have to pretend I'm going to hand over the evidence. Exactly. And tomorrow morning, when everything is ready, you will make the last call of your life as Robert Smith's wife. The last call. The words echoed in Helen's mind as she prepared to return to the 2-room apartment. In the East Side neighborhood, in less than 24 hours, her life would change forever. This time, however, the change would be by her own choice. The dawn of the decisive day arrived shrouded in a thick fog that covered Los Angeles like an omen. Helen had not managed to sleep a single minute, spending the hours going over every detail of the plan that Fernanda had devised. At 5 in the morning, her phone buzzed with a message from Maria Johnson. Rachel and Isabella are safe in Santa Monica. The girl thinks it's a surprise vacation. Everything is fine on our end. A huge weight lifted off Helen's shoulders. Regardless of what happened in the next few hours, Isabella was protected. At 6:30, a new message, this time from Fernanda. District Attorney Daniel has the documentation. The article is ready for publication. Waiting for your signal. Helen looked out the window of the empty apartment. Outside, the morning hustle began. Workers waiting for the bus, children heading to school, shopkeepers opening their doors. It was a routine she had learned to love over the past 3 months, but one she might never be a part of again. At 8 o'clock, her phone rang. Robert. I hope you've made the right decision, Helen. I have, she replied, keeping her voice steady. But I want guarantees. What kind of guarantees? I want your word that none of the families from Hope residents will be removed in the next 5 years, and I want the child and her mother to never be bothered. Robert laughed on the other end of the line. You're not in a position to make demands. No? Then maybe you need to know that I've made copies of the evidence and left them with trusted people. If anything happens, to me or them, everything will go to the press automatically." There was a pause. Helen could imagine Robert calculating his options. "All right, 5 years of moratorium for the project. As for your friends, they will only be left in peace if you fulfill your part of the deal. Noon at your office? Noon at my office. And Helen, come alone." At 10 in the morning, Helen was at Fernanda's apartment, watching the journalist make the final adjustments to the article that would change everything. The headline was direct and impactful. "Businessman Robert Smith used criminal methods to remove poor families in Los Angeles." "It's all here," said Fernanda, pointing to the computer screen. "Documents, photos, even recordings of calls we found on the flash drive. It's enough to destroy his career." "And the district attorney. Daniel is positioned with an FBI team. The moment you give the word, they will enter his office." Helen looked at the clock. 2 hours. "Helen, are you sure you want to do this in person? I can publish the article now and—" "No, I need to look him in the eyes when his world crumbles. I need him to understand that it was the woman he considered a useless doll who destroyed him." Fernanda nodded, understanding Helen's need for closure. "And then? What will you do afterward?" Helen looked out the window, watching the frenetic movement of the city. "I don't know. For the first time in 15 years, I don't know what my next step will be, and that gives me more hope than fear." 5 minutes past noon. Helen was in the elevator going up to the 30th floor of the commercial building where Robert kept his office. She wore the same simple outfit she had in the East Side neighborhood, a blue blouse and jeans, but carried a determination in her posture that 15 years of marriage had never revealed. Robert's secretary, a young and nervous girl, greeted her with evident relief. "Mrs. Helen, so good to see you. Mr. Smith is waiting in the conference room." Helen walked through the familiar corridors, observing the expensive paintings on the walls, the imported designer furniture, the trophies and certificates Robert displayed as symbols of his success. All of it had been built on the suffering of humble families. Robert was seated at the head of a glass conference table, flipping through some papers as if it were just another business meeting. He looked up when she entered, and Helen saw surprise on his face. She was no longer the submissive woman he expected to find. "Punctual as always," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." "I prefer to stand." Robert studied her face for a moment. "You've changed. I've learned who I really am." "And who are you, Helen?" "I am a woman who will no longer accept being an accomplice to crimes." The smile disappeared from Robert's face. "You chose the wrong side." Then Helen took an envelope from her pocket and placed it on the table. "No. For the first time in my life, I chose the right side." Robert opened the envelope and found copies of some documents, just a sample of what Helen possessed. His face turned red with anger. "Where are the originals?" "In a safe place, along with much more material than you can imagine." Robert stood up abruptly, walking toward her. "Helen, you have no idea what you're doing. It's not just about me. There are other people involved, powerful people who will not accept being exposed." "Great. The more corrupt people fall, the better. You will destroy entire families." Helen laughed, a bitter sound. "Like you destroyed mine? Like you destroyed hundreds of others?" Robert stopped just inches from her, trying to intimidate her with his physical presence, as he had done for years, but Helen did not back down. "Last chance, Helen. Hand everything over to me now. We go home, and we pretend none of this happened." "No." "No. I will not go back to being your puppet. I will not pretend I don't know who you really are, and I will not allow you to continue destroying innocent lives?" Robert stared at her for a long moment, then returned to his chair and picked up the phone. "Cardoso? It's now. Do what you have to do." Helen felt her heart freeze. "Robert, no. You should have accepted my offer." It was then that Helen realized she had made a fatal mistake. Robert never intended to honor the agreement. The call to Cardoso meant that the threat against Rachel and Isabella would be executed immediately. But then she remembered they were in Santa Monica. Helen smiled. "What is it?" Robert asked, puzzled by her reaction. "You sent your thug after the wrong family." "What do you mean?" Helen took out her cell phone and quickly typed a message. "Now." "Robert, all these years, you made a fundamental mistake. You always underestimated me." In less than 2 minutes, the door to the room swung open violently. 3 FBI agents entered, followed by District Attorney Daniel Rodriguez. "Robert Smith, you are under arrest for forming a criminal organization, active and passive corruption, and crimes against the economic order." Robert looked from Helen to the police officers, his arrogance finally giving way to panic. "Helen, what did you do?" "What I should have done 15 years ago," she replied, watching the agents handcuff the man who had controlled her life for so long. "I chose the right side." As Robert was led out of the room, Helen looked out the panoramic window that overlooked all of Los Angeles. Down below, scattered throughout the metropolis, were the 2,000 families who would never know that a 38-year-old woman had changed their lives forever. For the first time in 15 years, Helen Smith felt truly free. 3 weeks after Robert's arrest, Helen was sitting on a bench in a park in Santa Monica, watching Isabella build sandcastles with other children on the beach. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of orange, and for the first time in months, Helen could breathe without feeling the weight of constant threat. "She's adapting well," Rachel said, sitting beside her on the weathered wooden bench. "Yesterday she asked me if we could live here forever." Helen smiled sadly. "And what did you say?" "That real life is waiting for us in Los Angeles, but that sometimes it's good to dream." The 2 women had arrived in Santa Monica the day after Robert's arrest, when Maria Johnson managed to convince Rachel that it was safe to meet with Helen. Maria's sister's inn was simple but welcoming, frequented mainly by working-class families seeking a few days of rest away from the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles. "Helen, you have a call," Mrs. Johnson, Maria's sister, said as she approached the bench. "It's from the lawyer." Helen stood up with her stomach in knots. Since Robert's arrest, her life had become a tangled web of legal, property, and bureaucratic questions that she could barely comprehend. The call was from Sandra Johnson, the lawyer Maria had recommended to represent her in the divorce proceedings and asset division. "Helen, I have news. Good and bad." "Go ahead." "The good news is that the judge accepted our request for separation of assets. Considering that you were a victim of coercion and threats, and that you cooperated decisively with the investigation, you are entitled to a significant portion of the estate." Helen felt her legs go weak. "How much?" "We are still calculating, but we are talking about several $1,000,000. Robert built an empire, and half of it is legally yours." "And the bad news?" "Robert is trying to reverse his arrest. His lawyers claim that the evidence was obtained improperly, that you did not have permission to access the company's documents." Helen leaned against the inn's wall. "Can they succeed?" "I don't know. But Helen, I need to warn you about something. Yesterday I received an offer from Robert's lawyers. They are offering a deal." "What kind of deal?" "They return your share of the assets, you drop the charges and go back to him. In exchange, all investigations are dropped." Helen closed her eyes, feeling the old sensation of entrapment tightening her chest again. And if I don't accept? They will fight in court. They can drag the process out for years, spending all the money on legal fees, and there is a possibility that Robert could be acquitted on some technicality. Lawyer, can I ask you a question? Do you think he can force me to go back? Physically? No, but financially and legally? He can make your life a nightmare. When Helen returned to the beach, she found Rachel helping Isabella decorate the sandcastle with seashells and dried seaweed. The scene was so simple and beautiful that she felt her eyes welling up. "Mom, Aunt Anna is crying," Isabella observed. Isabella dropped the seashells and ran to hug Helen. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just sand in my eye." But Rachel knew Helen too well to believe the excuse. When Isabella returned to her play, she pulled Helen for a walk along the beach. What happened on the call? Helen shared about the plea deal and the possibility of Robert being released. Rachel listened in silence, kicking seashells in the sand as she processed the information. "And you, what do you want to do?" "I don't know, Ray. If I accept the deal, he gets free to continue doing what he's always done. Other families will suffer. And if you don't accept, I could lose everything, and you all could be in danger again." Rachel stopped walking and turned to Helen. "Helen, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I was a child, I lived with my grandmother in a small house in Little Tokyo. It was an old house with a big yard where she raised chickens and grew vegetables. I loved that house." Helen waited for her to continue. "When I was 12, some men showed up saying the house was in a hazardous area, that it would be demolished. They offered a ridiculous amount to my grandmother. She didn't want to accept, but she didn't have the money to hire a lawyer. And what happened? We moved to a tiny apartment in the outskirts. My grandmother was never the same again. She died 2 years later from sadness and longing for her home." Rachel kicked a shell hard, sending it flying across the wet sand. "You know what they built in place of my grandmother's house? A luxury building. Apartments worth millions for rich people." Helen understood where Rachel was going. "Ray!" "Helen, you have the chance to seek justice, not only for my grandmother, but for all the grandmothers, mothers, and children who were kicked out of their homes by men like Robert. It's worth any risk." That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Helen sat on the porch of the inn, watching the stars shining over the dark sea. The sea breeze carried the smell of salt and seaweed, a scent she had learned to associate with freedom. Her phone rang. It was Fernanda. "Helen, how are you?" "Confused, tired, but alive. Listen, I had an idea. What if we didn't wait for justice to decide Robert's fate?" "What do you mean?" "The article I published about him made national headlines. Other journalists are investigating similar cases in different states. There's even a documentary being produced." Helen straightened in her chair. "And? What if you agreed to give an exclusive interview? Tell your complete story, from the marriage to the discovery of the crimes. Show all of Brazil who Robert Smith really is. Won't that put more pressure on him to try for a deal?" "It will, but it will also make it impossible for him to cover up the case or get acquitted. Public opinion is a powerful force, Helen." Helen looked at the room where Rachel and Isabella were peacefully sleeping. 2 women who had risked everything to protect her, who had become her true family. "Fernanda, if I do this interview, there's no turning back, right?" "No. It would be burning all bridges." "And what if it goes wrong? What if he seeks revenge?" "Helen, you've already survived the worst he could do. You discovered who you are, found people who truly love you, and had the courage to confront him. What more could he take from you?" Helen looked back at the stars, pondering Fernanda's question. What could Robert still take from her? The answer came clear as the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Nothing that truly mattered. Schedule the interview. It's time to tell my story." On the other end of the line, Fernanda smiled. "Helen, are you sure?" "Absolutely. But there's one condition." "What?" "I want the interview to be recorded here on the beach, with Rachel and Isabella by my side, so that all of Brazil understands that family isn't about blood or money. It's about love, protection, and choices." When she hung up the phone, Helen felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. In the morning, she would call the lawyer and refuse the deal. She would confront Robert in court, in the media, and in any other battlefield necessary, because some fights are worth all the risks, and some victories are only possible when you have a true family by your side. 6 months after the interview that shook the nation, Helen stood on the porch of the apartment she had bought in the Arts District, watching Isabella play in the small yard with the other children from the building. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, simple but cozy, very different from the mansion in the gardens where she had spent 15 years of her life. The interview with Fernanda had aired in prime time and made headlines in every newspaper across the country. Helen had told her story without omitting any painful details, from the years of controlling marriage to the discovery of Robert's crimes, including the 3 months of amnesia that had transformed her into a completely new person. The impact was devastating for Robert Smith and his network of corruption. In addition to the prison sentence already handed down, he lost all public contracts, had his assets frozen by the court, and faced over 20 criminal charges. 3 city council members and 2 judges were also arrested in the operation that followed Helen's revelations. "Aunt Anna!" Isabella shouted from the yard, now 9 years old and much smarter. "Come play tag with us." "I'm coming, sweetheart," Helen replied, closing the laptop where she was working on organizing a non-profit dedicated to helping families victimized by real estate speculation. With the money from the division of assets, which the court had guaranteed after months of legal battles, Helen had created the Hope Institute, an organization that offered free legal assistance to communities threatened with eviction. Maria Johnson had agreed to be the coordinator, and together they had already prevented the eviction of over 500 families throughout the Los Angeles metropolitan area. "Helena!" Rachel called from the kitchen. "There's a call for you!" Rachel was now working as an administrative assistant at the Hope Institute after completing a technical course that Helena had insisted on paying for. They lived together in a 2-room apartment in the Arts District, an unconventional family but deeply united by shared experiences. The call was from Sandra Johnson, their lawyer. "Helena, I have 2 pieces of news for you, one good and one surprising. You can start with the good. The Supreme Court denied Robert's last appeal. The conviction is confirmed. 12 years in a maximum security prison. There are no more appeals possible." Helena felt a deep sense of relief. "And the surprising one? He wants to talk to you." Silence stretched for several seconds. "What do you mean?" "His lawyers contacted my office. Robert is requesting a private conversation with you. He says he has important things to reveal." "What kind of things?" "I don't know, but Helena, you are not obligated to accept. It could be an attempt at intimidation or some kind of emotional blackmail." Helena looked out the window, watching Isabella run after her friends, laughing loudly and carefree. The girl was now studying at a nearby private school, had swimming lessons on Saturdays, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian when she grew up. "Helena, are you there?" "I am. Sandra, I think I'm going to accept." "Are you sure? I can go with you if you want." "No, I need to do this alone." 2 weeks later, Helena was sitting in a visiting room at the state penitentiary, waiting for Robert to appear. It was the first time she would see him since that day in the office, when her life had changed forever. When he finally entered, Helena barely recognized him. The arrogant, impeccably dressed man had been replaced by someone visibly aged, with completely grey hair and a hunched posture that spoke of months of defeat. "Helena," he said, sitting across from her, "thank you for coming." "Robert?" They studied each other in silence for a few moments. Helena noticed that his eyes, once always cold and calculating, now carried something she had never seen before: remorse. "Are you okay?" he asked, surprising her. "I am. Better than I've ever been." "And the girl, Isabella?" "She's fine too. Why do you ask?" Robert sighed deeply. "Helena, these months in prison have given me time to think about everything I did, about who I became, about how I treated you." Helena waited for him to continue. "When you disappeared, I wasn't looking for my wife. I was looking for my possession, someone who belonged to me and had dared to disobey me." "Robert, let me finish, please. I want you to know that I understand now. I understand why you ran away, why you reported me, why you chose a simple life instead of going back to the mansion." Helena leaned forward. "And what do you understand?" "That I never loved you. Neither you nor anyone else. I only knew how to possess, control, use. I turned you into a doll because I couldn't see women as real people." The words were harsh, but Helena sensed sincerity in them. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to ask for your forgiveness, and because I want you to know that your report, it saved more people than you can imagine." "How so?" Robert took a folded paper from the pocket of his prison shirt. "This is a list. Names of politicians, judges, businessmen who were involved in the schemes. People I protected because they protected my business." Helena took the paper with trembling hands. There were dozens of names, some she recognized from the news. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you were right. What we were doing was criminal. We destroyed families, entire communities, all in the name of profit. And no matter how hard I try, I can't live with that on my conscience anymore." Helena folded the paper and put it in her bag. "Robert, this doesn't change anything between us." "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness hoping that you will forgive me. I'm asking because I need you to know that I acknowledge what I did." They fell silent again, two people who had shared 15 years of life and were now complete strangers. "Helena, can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Are you happy now?" Helena thought about the question. She thought about the apartment in the Arts District, filled with Isabella's laughter and conversations with Rachel. She thought about the Hope Institute and the families they had managed to help. She thought about the mornings waking up without fear, the decisions she made of her own free will, the freedom to be who she truly was. "I am," she replied. "I am very happy." Robert smiled sadly. "I'm glad for you." When Helena left the penitentiary, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky with the same orange hues she had learned to love in Santa Monica. She took out her phone and called Rachel. "Ray, it's me. I'm on my way back." "How was it?" "Different from what I expected. He gave me information that will help many other investigations." "And how do you feel?" Helena looked at the city stretching out before her. The same Los Angeles where she was born, where she had been trapped in a loveless marriage, and where she was now building a life that was truly her own. "I feel free, Ray, completely free." "Isabella wants to know if you're bringing pizza for dinner." Helena laughed. "Of course, with cream cheese, just the way she likes it." "Helena?" "Yes?" "We love you." "I love you all too. Very much." When she hung up the phone, Helena looked back one last time at the penitentiary behind her. Robert Smith was part of her past, a life she had left behind. In front of her was the future, uncertain, challenging, but hers by right. She got into the car and drove home. where Rachel and Isabella were waiting for her with hugs, laughter, and the promise of another day in the family she had chosen for herself. In her bag, the paper with the names Robert had given her represented not only the end of her old life, but the beginning of a new mission. There was still much work to be done. Many families. For the first time in her life, Helen Smith knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. And this, she discovered, was worth more than any wealth Robert had ever offered.